Hello, I'm Andrew Susskind, and I'm a therapist and author based on the west side of Los Angeles since 1992, specializing in trauma and addictions. Welcome to my podcast, named after my recent book, It's Not About the Sex. Here we have honest conversations related to compulsive sexual behavior and trauma, all from a sexual health perspective. Our intention is to offer fresh viewpoints and practical strategies toward establishing greater intimacy and a more deeply connected life. Let's begin. Hello, Sue.
Hi, Andrew.
How's it going?
It's going really well. I'm doing good. I'm on spring break. Well, I don't know. It's not really spring. Is it? Yeah, it is actually, right?
We're not quite at summer till next week, I
You can't
think.
tell when it's 98 degrees if it's
That's right.
if it's spring or summer. But yeah, so this week I was doing some self-care in between classes, and it's good to be here with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I had 2 weeks off and I feel revitalized. I feel so rested and ready to take on the podcast.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're doing this.
Me too.
So, I was talking to you about this off the pod, so to speak, and I just thought, I know you've had people on in the past to talk about brain spotting, but you know all about brain spotting. You're certified in that, and I thought it'd be interesting to kind of hear your take on it. Maybe you could help us understand the history of it a little bit, where it came from, and actually figure out how the process works and what is the outcome of it. Why do people do brain spotting? All that fun stuff.
I would love to talk about it. And our previous brain spotting guests, I think, came from more of either a scientific perspective, a more academic scientific perspective. Our most recent with a focus on addictions, and all of that is fantastic, of course. But like we talked about, some of the mystery around brain spotting doesn't really have to be so mysterious, right? And so maybe we can break through that mystery today together.
Oh, that'd be great.
So where would you like to begin?
Well, just like, where did brain starting spot? where did brain spotting start?
It's a tongue twister. So Dr. David Grand is the founder of Brainspotting. And just a little bit about David. He has been a therapist and actually a psychoanalyst since the 80s. Very traditional training, first in social work and a PhD in psychology. And he was one of the earlier pioneers of EMDR. And I'll talk a little bit more about EMDR in a moment. But he was really invested in the EMDR community and eventually developed his own version of EMDR that he called natural flow EMDR. Okay. And so he was very much in the pioneering days of nervous system regulation and helping folks with trauma, right? That was the original focus. In 2003, and this is where it gets interesting, he was working with a client for about a year, and she was a 16-year-old figure skater. And as the story goes, she came to him primarily for some childhood trauma, but also because she had trouble with some of her performance anxiety and not being able to take her actual skating to the next level. Okay. So what happened was he had been working with her for about a year doing the EMDR thing, and it just wasn't getting her where she wanted to go. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're familiar, Sue, but back then in 2003, it was really important for women figure skaters to have a solid triple loop.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Not the double sow cow.
Exactly. Not that, not the double axle, but really the triples at the
Okay,
time
so that was,
were
yeah. Now they're doing quads, I think, but yeah,
exactly. I
crazy.
know it's a different time and place in
Right.
2022. But what happened was he was working with her in an EMDR style. And when we talk about EMDR, it's bilateral stimulation where almost like what you see in a traditional hypnosis, it's the back and forth movement,
Mm-hmm.
bilateral movement, and the person is following either a light strobe or actual fingers, but it's moving the eyes back and forth. And what David noticed with this particular figure skater is when he slowed down the movement, something different was happening. And so he asked her, would it be okay to just stay at this particular spot and see what happens? And of course, she was open to it. She had a lot of trust in him at that point. And when he stayed with her in that one spot, rather than going back and forth, there was processing like never before.
Wow.
Her eyes were wobbling, which is a common processing kind of experience. There was different movements in her body. There was sweating. There was this experience of her having a lot of somatic processing in such a way that they hadn't seen before. So she left the session and David said, why don't you call me in the morning from the rink and let me know how the triple loop goes? So what do you think happened, Sue?
She hit it. She nailed it.
She nailed the triple loop. And the story goes that she never missed it or hardly ever missed it after that.
Wow.
So he knew that something very powerful had occurred
Mm-hmm.
and started to use what he called the brain spot, right? Rather than the back and forth, finding a spot where the processing naturally happens. And and what actually happened was he just started doing what eventually came to be called brain spotting on everyone who would do it with him, his colleagues, his patients, his dog. I mean, whoever would do it with him, he would practice it. And more than what he experienced with the MDR, things really were shifting internally for people. And there was relief of symptoms.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So you said the word shifting, because when you were talking about the eye movement stopping, and then there's the wobble of the eyeball. Would you say that shifting is like a processing thing, or like can you explain what that shifting means?
Okay. When a client finds a brain spot, and we're not going to have time to really be able to put that in words because it's something that's so specific to what happens in session.
Mm-hmm.
But when they find that spot where the activation in their body is higher, what we're talking about, what I call shifting, but it's not the best term,
Okay.
is anything from head to toe that is moving. We're looking for movement. So some people will, the most common thing is that maybe their eye blinking will increase or will actually have a different rhythm to it.
Okay.
So the eyes are really, really important with both EMDR and brain spotting.
Interesting.
But from head to toe, some people will just start, their legs will start moving,
Okay.
or one finger will start moving, or they'll say that they're having heat in their neck, or something on the crown of their head is feeling like a vibration. So it's really anything that is moving somatically in the body. And that's what we could consider the release or the discharge, right? We're always looking for movement, because if someone's too still and they're not experiencing movement, they may or may not be benefiting from the process.
I see.
But some people are very, very quiet processors, and some people are just have more happening that's visible.
Mm-hmm.
But I can almost always see something shifting in the ocular system, in the eyes. And that's why there's that particular research that goes on that shows us that that kind of difference that shows up in the eyes is really showing us that there's some kind of healing
Mm-hmm.
that's happening.
Interesting. So, two things I wanted to go back to. And you bring up somatic. Can you just unbox that a little bit? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. So in traditional talk therapy, oftentimes I used to ask questions, and I still do, like how do you feel about that? Or what are you thinking around what we're talking about? And so there's a lot of focus on thoughts and feelings, which is part of therapy, right? It's part of awareness, it's part of observing oneself, etc. Nowadays, I ask questions like, and this happens in brain spotting all the time, what's happening in your body right now? What are you noticing internally?
Hmm.
I noticed when I said something about your mother, you looked in a different direction. What happened in your body as you did that? Right. So we're really helping to grow what's often called somatic awareness, and helping people have that more comprehensive experience of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Right. Sensations are really what describes what's happening in the body.
So, it's an overall awareness, but being able to actually say it what it is, to put words
Correct.
to the actual feeling. Cool.
Right.
And
I'll just share something about my own process around this. I was very frozen and intellectualized, and still work on that all the time. But because of my background, that was my survival strategy. And in somatic work, like brain spotting, it's really about thawing. It's really about being able to know what's happening in my body, what's happening internally. How do I ground myself and really feel my body in my chair, my feet connected to the floor beneath me? All of those things that I was kind of a talking head. And since we come from the 80s, I think that being a talking head is being cut off from certain parts of who we are.
sure, right. Yeah, there is a big disconnect between our heads and our bodies, for sure.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
right.
So, can you talk a little bit about the training you did, and like how that came to be for you?
It's actually a very simple story. I had a few colleagues who I respect and really really look up to, who had taken the brain spotting training, and I saw their practices change, and I also saw the way they carry themselves differently, because part of training is working on oneself. It's not just an academic, I'll work on my clients and not deal with what's going on in me. It's really both. And so that's really what opened the door. And what I love about the brain spotting training is the initial foundational training is 1 year. It's 3 long weekends. And so that could be it. Like someone might just stop right there. I got so excited about it that I joined a consultation group. I had some buddies that I was in the training with, where we would do the sessions on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the process, and so it became clear to me that I ended up assisting some trainings. And actually in August, I'm going to a 5-day intensive with my favorite trainer in Colorado. And so it's an ongoing process. It's not like just going to a few weekends and letting it drop. It really has to be something that I think you're inspired by and that you continue to use on a regular basis.
Would you be able to do a little like mock session here with me? Just kind of maybe talk talk through it a little bit, like for our audience.
Of course. I mean that's the part that can't quite be replicated in a podcast. But what I would like to share, because this is the important part, is that there is a sequence that we use,
Okay.
what we call a setup, that is really the structure of brain spotting. But with that said, EMDR has a different language, and I'm not EMDR trained, but I want to say that EMDR is way more structured and has a protocol to how they work. And Francine Shapiro, who developed EMDR, had a very particular vision for it. And there are variations of it nowadays, attachment-based EMDR, different kinds of EMDR. But what I love about brain spotting is it's not rigid at all. David Grand talks about being the tail of the comet, where our clients are really like the comet and we are the tail. We're never in front of them. Their nervous system and their experience is what we're watching and observing and following. So it's very respectful in that way. The setups, just to set up for our listeners, I haven't counted them all, but there's probably a dozen different setups. So I'm going to be talking about gaze spotting, GAZE spotting, because I've been doing so much of that online with my clients. And so some people might know that with brain spotting, there is a pointer that we use to help people find the brain spot. But with gaze spotting, it's actually where their eyes naturally gravitate in a particular direction. It's not that they're looking at a particular spot as, that's the activation. And we're going to talk about this a little more as we go on. It's the angle of the eyes.
Right. Okay. It's not the object you're looking at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So with that said,
okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do catch myself, and I don't know, this is probably just human thing, like doing that without, just like I'd be staring off into something just completely mindless and be like, oh, I catch myself. And I noticed the dog does that too. Is that just a natural thing that he built off of?
Yes, it's not only natural, but it's informative in the sense of if we're gazing off in a particular direction, like I think about like little kids who sometimes look like they're kind of just, zoning out
right.
But oftentimes there's something very pleasurable. There might be a direction somebody looks at that just it's the eyes want to go there, right? So it can go in a lot of directions, but it could be pleasurable. It could be a way of processing, but either way, it's absolutely the human condition that does that. And that's what's so cool about brain spotting, because it's just harnessing what we naturally do.
In this crazy world, busy world.
In our crazy busy world.
Right.
That's right.
All right.
So do you want to
let's kind of walk through your sequence.
All right. So this is a gaze spotting sequence. So if I were in session with you, where I would begin is to ask you to come up with a memory or an experience. It could be in the distant past, or it could be very recent. It doesn't have to be traumatic, but something that was either disturbing or just was difficult or stressful for you. So when I say that out loud, is there something in particular that you might want to share with me about something stressful or disturbing?
Okay. So yeah, like I always go back to this stressful time, second grade, where I wet my pants in the middle of class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So say a little bit more about the circumstances and what was so challenging for you.
During that time. So I think I was at that time very shy and introverted and didn't know to how to assert myself and actually ask the teacher if I could leave the room. So I was
Hmm.
struggling with that for a while, sitting there, and there was a sign that when someone left the room to go to the bathroom, they would flip it over, and it was flipped over, and I sat there waiting for someone to come back, and they never did, and I just didn't get up and go. So I struggle with that assertiveness, and that just not taking care of myself in that moment.
Hmm. And as you're reflecting on that moment, what's happening right now for you?
Inside, so I just feel sad about it for that little person.
Yeah. And where do you experience the sadness in your body right now?
I'd say I feel it in my gut. That's where it
Hmm.
sits, pretty heavy in there.
Hmm. So let's just take a moment and notice what's happening in your gut, and that you're acknowledging that there's a sadness as you're reflecting back on that second grade part of you. So if you could just double check from head to toe anything else that you're picking up on physically.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like pressure in my chest a little bit, and just, yeah, just kind of the heaviness all over.
Hmm. Sure. So just notice that. And if you were to rate the activation in your gut and your chest from 0 to 10, 10 being the most activation, how high is it at this moment?
Probably like around a 6.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm wondering, because I've been watching your eyes as we're talking about this, I'm wondering if you're aware of where your eyes naturally gravitate right now, and I can help you if you need it.
Oh, I feel like my eyes go down
Okay.
to the left, maybe. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So what I want to invite you to do is just allow your eyes to go where they want to go. It sounds like you're aware that there's something about that direction, right? And we're just going to stay there. That's going to be the brain spot for today's session. And what I want to invite you to do is you can share as much or as little as you choose. I think I mentioned before, some people are quieter processors, some people really want to connect and share out loud what's happening. So, what I would like you to do is just stay with that particular spot. And if there's any feelings, images, memories, sensations that you're having, we're just going to spend a few minutes here for the sake of this demonstration. But I'm going to be quiet and just let you be with that direction from your eyes where you are right now.
I do feel that I was comforted, or some comfort's coming.
Mhm.
And I do feel a little lighter and not as heavy.
Where do you feel lighter?
Just in my core.
Okay, so just notice that.
I feel like I can breathe easier.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying that and breathing easier, just it feels better just doing that.
Mhm. And when you say better, is there a place in your body where you're feeling better or different?
Well, I just feel like I was very tight in my chest, and
Hmm.
I don't feel as though I'm that tight right now.
Great.
And that sometimes I forget to breathe, and I think that's what I'm getting from this,
Yeah, good.
honestly.
Just going to go a couple more minutes and let you savor what's happening in terms of your breath opening up, your chest not being as heavy. Just notice that. So we're fast forwarding the process, but for the sake of our listeners,
Hmm.
if you can scan your body from head to toe right now, just take a moment to scan your body. What are you noticing now?
I'm noticing that I don't have those feelings anymore, and that I feel I'm back to zero where we were before we started.
Back to zero in terms of the amount of disturbance or
Yeah.
activation? Huh. And what's that like to be at zero?
It's just pleasant. It just feels good. I feel like I healed myself a little bit and just reminded myself that I can take care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a beautiful description, and I want to highlight that, but I also want to debrief a little bit more with you. What I do after I check from head to toe, the scan of the body, is you kind of anticipated it. You said I'm having a zero on the 0 to 10. We call it SUDS scale.
Hmm.
Um, and so, what did you notice? I know this was very abbreviated, but what did you notice in the experience with the gay spotting?
I noticed like this twitch. I don't know if you could see it. I had this twitch going on my
Which
mouth.
what do you think about the twitch? What do you think that might be saying?
Yeah, that there's other stuff going on inside me that what I was doing, I needed to just keep doing it, and then it was going to create this path almost to my healing.
Twitching, by the way, is a very common um, release, right? There's some kind of discharge. We don't know exactly how that works, and I'm not an academic, so I don't talk in those terms. But we know that something's moving, right? Like I talked about before, we're looking for movement. We're looking for relief. Most people who benefit from brain spotting, to answer your earlier question, feel like they get perspective
Hmm.
or room around the issue so it doesn't feel quite as burdensome. And that when they go back to revisit, in this case, wedding yourself as a second grader, that it doesn't have the same charge that it had before. That's the hope.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. What I wanted to mention visually is that with my clients who are doing any kind of brain spotting, I give them the option of actually putting on a headset and having very, very soft bilateral sounds. What we
Uh,
do know, what the research has shown, is that when there's bilateral sounds, it can actually promote more processing. That it's not necessary. Some people don't like to have that. In addition to, they just want to be without sounds, or it's almost like new age kind of music, but it goes back and forth from one ear to the other very, very slowly, and it's very, very soft. So I, I always say it's important that you can hear my voice and just hear the background sounds at the same time. Some people find it super soothing and actually use it to help go to sleep at night and to feel some stress relief. So bilateral sounds can be fantastic. I wanted to also share that if I had 10 brain spotting therapists talking about their sequence of working with their clients, there would be all kinds of variations. And what I love about David's training and his perspective on this is that there's no one size fits all. There's no rigidity to the process. That being the tail of the comet and following the client's nervous system and letting that healing happening, right? So I think you kind of said this, Sue, that there was something about you feeling like you were healing yourself. I was I was witness. Um, we have what we sometimes call a relational attunement, meaning that I am right here with you and really tuned into your process. But that there's something about not feeling locked into a particular approach beyond the initial setup. Does that make sense?
Right, right. Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think like the you knowing your clients too and knowing their energy and you're great at being able to guide and help people get to what it is they need and what they're looking for.
Some clients gravitate to it really, really well, and some people feel frustrated by it. And so I don't take that personally, but I do offer it and I invite people to consider it as an alternative or as a complement to talk therapy. I once in a blue moon, I'll see somebody just for brain spotting, but typically they'll have another therapist who does the talk therapy piece, and then I'll work with them just on the brain spotting. But you're right. I most people I've known already, and so I have a sense of how to be with them. And honestly, it's interesting the word guide because I kind of see their nervous system as my guide, right? That I really am humble to the process and to knowing that their nervous system has a lot of wisdom, and we're trying to un t- what's the word to tap into that and to understand what that healing path really is, right? I mean, does that, I'm curious because this is the first time you and I have done this together. And so I kind of blindsided you a little bit
A little
with
bit,
our,
just a little bit, yeah.
but is there anything that either surprises you or concerns you or that you have questions about in terms of how this experience was for you today? And I know it was very, very short, but
Yeah, well, I think like because I felt that I'm going to look into it more. I think like that's a good starting point. You know, I think I'm not going to walk away from it without taking something from that with me and kind of processing a little more and see if I try this again on my own, am I going to have the same feelings and emotions that I felt when we just started it? So I think maybe I'm not completely over it. Or maybe it still is in there, but yeah, I wasn't expecting to go there today. And um, 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 yeah, I think it will help me like move forward with the healing in that. I think there's a lot of little young me that needs some more trauma healing, and so it's an exciting step for me. I'm gonna take it and learn from it, and I think apply it and see what happens.
and I'd be happy to offer some brain spotting time with you as a follow up.
How long do your sessions usually take?
I fit them into 50 minutes.
15 or
50.
50? Oh,
Yeah, it's a
okay.
regular
Session. Like,
therapy session.
yeah.
There are some brain spotters who will offer longer sessions for folks who want that additional time to process. whether it be 75 minutes or 90 minutes,
Wow.
or even intensives. Like David Grand will work with athletes or performers in a more intensive way, and it really varies. So that, again, there's no cookie cutter approach. And the other thing I just wanted to share is that I find this very, very respectful. Nothing is being done to you as the client. It's more about giving space for you to have an opportunity to give oxygen to something that maybe hasn't been focused on in a long time, right?
It's interesting. Yeah, the word oxygen is important because I mean, for me, it was like breathing into it, and that was important in that moment, and that's what I needed to do. And
Before we wind down our time, what I wanted to share is that it's really about curiosity and
hmm,
open heartedness and willingness to try a different kind of approach to what it means to deal with not only traumatic memories. I mean, some of my clients will come in and say, I had this really awful talk with my business partner yesterday, and I can't shake it. And I might
mm,
say, well, would you like to do some brain spotting around that? So David Grand is very clear that it's not just about trauma, it's about any activation
oh,
that is being held in the nervous system, the stored memories that happen to all of us when something is too much to process at the time.
okay, that's great because I was going to ask you like, what other places can you hit as far as like outside of trauma? So that's good to know.
Anything that's activating.
Gosh, so much.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Is there a way to do you? I mean, I think even though you are the tail of the comet, is there practice that people can take from this and do on their own, or is it definitely needs?
It's a bigger answer than this, but
Yeah.
there is something called self brain spotting, but initially it has to be taught to someone.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And I'm actually not that familiar with it. I see it, and this is my bias, as a collaborative process where there's both the neurobiological attunement and the relational attunement. And for me, nothing can replace the experience of two humans in that relational field. Um,
And the witness of it is so important. Yeah. I get that.
Especially when we're talking sometimes about early childhood experiences, because many times my clients will come in and just tell me I was completely alone. And when that happened, whatever that was, there was nobody that I could talk to. And so when we're sitting together quietly with the bilateral sounds, with the brain spotting sequence, with the nervous system, it's reparative without doing anything,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
There's a an acronym in the brain spotting community called WAIT, and WAIT means why am I talking? And that's for the brain spotting therapist.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a very subtle, quiet process. If I'm talking too much, there's something going on with me. I'm
Right.
anxious or I'm trying too hard or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
is. But why am I talking? I love that.
That's interesting. We talk
Yeah.
a lot about therapy and the stillness within it and how it's okay. The silent, what you do with that silence is an important thing to consider and think about.
I mean, where else in life do we really get to sit with another person quietly?
Yeah, it just doesn't happen enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking really about attachment repair. We're talking about, old ruptures that, created a profound sense of isolation for a lot of folks. So, yeah, I'm sitting here kind of getting warm and fuzzy, literally in my body, my sensations, because brain spotting changed my practice and it really changed my nervous system. And I've been doing it, I think 6 years now, 6 or 7 years. And I'm still very enthusiastic about it. I'm so excited to do the 5-day intensive with my favorite trainer.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, for anybody who's interested in checking out some of the research and understanding a little bit more, brainspotting.com is the website.
That's easy enough to remember.
Yeah. All right, Sue. Thank you so much for your willingness and cooperation and love. And I hope that our listeners got a little better sense of what brain spotting can be about.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening today. It was really intimate sharing the time with my colleague and friend Sue Merlino and demonstrating this really sometimes mysterious but powerful process called brain spotting. If you want to learn more about brain spotting, check out www.brainspotting.com. And if you're so inclined, please give us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe and share my podcast with those who may benefit. I look forward to you joining us the next time. And don't forget to stay connected.